Watched my daughter-in-law Jennifer post another Thanksgiving photo, 23 people around their dining table, golden light from the chandelier my late husband Robert picked out 15 years ago, before the cancer took him. I counted the faces twice. My grandson Tyler was there, wearing the sweater I'd mailed him for his birthday. My son David stood behind Jennifer's chair, his hand on her shoulder, that same tight smile he'd worn since his promotion to regional manager. And there, in the center of it all, Jennifer's mother Patricia, holding the turkey platter like she'd cooked it herself. I wasn't in the photo. I hadn't been invited. Again. This was the 6th holiday in a row. If you've ever sat alone in a house that used to overflow with noise and love, watching your family celebrate without you through a glowing screen, you know exactly what that November evening felt like. The silence pressed against my eardrums. The heating system clicked on, and I startled. That's how quiet it was. 67 years old, and I'd become someone who jumped at familiar sounds in her own home. Before you think I'm just some bitter old woman, and maybe I am, maybe that's fair, let me tell you where you're watching this from. Drop a comment below. Are you in California? New York? Somewhere small where everyone knows your name? I'm in Connecticut, in a suburb that used to feel like community. Now it just feels like a place where I wait. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, stories about what happens when family becomes strangers, when patience runs out, when quiet people finally stop being quiet, check the description box below. Because this story goes places I never thought I'd go. The excuses started innocently enough. 3 years ago, Jennifer called 2 days before Easter. Tyler had come down with something. Probably just a cold, but they couldn't risk exposing me. I was only 64 then, but apparently that made me fragile. I'd offered to bring soup, to help. She'd said no, they had it handled, maybe next time. Next time was 4th of July. They were doing something small, just immediate family. I didn't ask where I fit in that category. David got on the phone afterward, his voice doing that thing it does when he's rehearsed what he's about to say. They were trying to simplify, Mom. Less stress. You understand. I said I understood. I always said I understood. Thanksgiving that year, they went to Jennifer's parents' house in Rhode Island. Christmas, they did a quiet celebration, just the 3 of them. David explained they were trying to create new traditions, focus on their nuclear family. Nuclear. Like I was radioactive. Like being around me might contaminate something. Robert would have known what to do. He had a way of cutting through nonsense, of saying the quiet parts out loud without making people defensive. But Robert had been gone for 8 years by then, and I'd spent those years trying to be the mother-in-law who didn't cause problems, who didn't make demands, who understood that young families needed space. I gave them so much space I disappeared. By the 2nd year, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, Mother's Day, the excuses became more elaborate. Jennifer's sister was having a hard time, they needed to support her. Tyler had a big project due, the house was too chaotic for visitors. David threw his back out moving furniture. The dog had anxiety. The dog had anxiety. About company. I started keeping a journal. Not because I'm vindictive, or maybe I am, maybe that's what I was becoming, but because I needed to see if I was going crazy. If I was remembering wrong. If maybe I really was as peripheral as I felt. March 15th, Easter, told Tyler too young for big family gatherings, needs calm environment. Tyler is 12. May 10th, Mother's Day, David called at 9 p.m., said they'd had a family emergency. Saw Jennifer's Instagram story from that afternoon. They were at brunch at the Riverside Grill. July 4th, no call, no explanation. Saw the fireworks party photos 3 days later. Patricia was there. Jennifer's sister Amanda was there. Amanda's new boyfriend was there. I wasn't there. The 3rd year, I stopped being surprised. I started being strategic. I'd call 3 weeks before holidays, offer to host, to make it easy. Jennifer would thank me, say she'd check the calendar, that things were so hectic. Then silence. Then photos posted after the fact, evidence of celebrations I'd never been told about. Except I had been told about them. I just hadn't been invited to them. My sister Carol noticed before I admitted it out loud. We met for coffee in January. This was just after New Year's, the 7th missed holiday, and she asked point-blank why I hadn't been at David's house for Christmas. I told her they'd wanted something small. She set her cup down hard enough that coffee sloshed onto the saucer. "Linda," she said, "you're not small. You're his mother." That's when something cracked open inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something worse, clarity. The kind that makes your stomach hurt and your hands shake and your mind replay every excuse, every dismissal, every time you told yourself you were being understanding when really you were being erased. Carol had 3 daughters. She saw all of them every week. She had 5 grandchildren who called her Nana and texted her memes and asked her advice about school and boys and friendship drama. She had a life that included her family, not despite them. I went home and looked at my bank statements. Robert had been a careful man, an engineer who believed in planning. We'd been careful together. The life insurance, the pension, the investments. I had more money than I needed for a life this small. More money than I had things to spend it on. And that's when the idea started to take shape. Not revenge, not at first. Just something that was mine. Something they couldn't take photos at without my permission. Something that existed outside the narrative they'd built where I was optional, where I was someone who understood, who didn't make waves, who accepted whatever crumbs they offered. I started looking at real estate listings. Mountain properties, hours away from Connecticut, in places where the air was thin and cold and clean. Places where cell service was spotty and surprise visits would require planning, effort, intention. Places where people couldn't just forget about me because I wasn't convenient. And if you've ever reached a point where you realized you'd been accommodating your own exclusion, where you'd been so afraid of being difficult that you'd made yourself invisible, keep watching. Because what I did next surprised everyone. Most of all, it surprised me. The property was in Vermont, 40 minutes from the nearest town with a grocery store. The listing described it as rustic, which meant the cabin needed work. But it sat on 12 acres with views of the Green Mountains, and the isolation. God, the isolation felt like possibility instead of punishment. I made an offer in February. Cash. The seller accepted within 3 days. I didn't tell David. Didn't tell Jennifer. Didn't post about it on Facebook or send excited texts to the family group chat that I'd been muted in anyway. Yes, I'd noticed. When you're the only one whose messages never get reactions, you notice. Instead, I hired contractors. Updated the electrical, installed new windows, had the well water tested. I bought furniture from a store in Burlington that delivered, a sturdy oak dining table that seated 4, not 20. A reading chair positioned by the window. A bed frame that faced east, toward the sunrise. I called it my project. When Carol asked what I was up to, I told her I was keeping busy. When my neighbor Eleanor mentioned she hadn't seen me around much on weekends, I said I'd taken up hiking. Neither was a lie, exactly. Just not the whole truth. The whole truth was I was building a life that didn't include waiting for phone calls that never came. By May, the cabin was finished. I spent Memorial Day weekend there alone. Holiday number 8 that I wasn't included in David's plans. And the silence was different than the silence in Connecticut. That silence had been empty. This silence was full. Wind through pine trees. A fox picking its way across the meadow at dusk. My own breathing as I sat on the porch with coffee and watched morning light paint the mountains gold. No one wished me Happy Memorial Day. I didn't wish it back. June and July, I went up every other weekend. Learned the back roads, figured out which farm stand sold the best tomatoes, discovered a hiking trail that led to a waterfall I had entirely to myself. I bought local honey from a woman named Ruth who didn't ask questions about why a woman my age was living alone in the mountains. She just sold me the honey and mentioned there was a book club in town if I was interested. I wasn't. Not because I didn't like books, but because I was still figuring out what I wanted this life to be. And part of me, a part one wasn't proud of, was waiting. Waiting for David to notice I wasn't always available anymore. Waiting for Jennifer to ask where I'd been. Waiting for someone to realize I'd stopped reaching out, stopped offering, stopped hoping. Nobody noticed. Or if they did, nobody said anything. 4th of July came and went. More photos. Patricia wearing the apron I'd given Jennifer for her bridal shower. Tyler looking bored in the background of someone's iPhone video. David manning the grill in the backyard where Robert had taught him to build a fire when he was 9 years old. I was at the cabin, reading a mystery novel on the porch, eating pasta salad I'd made just for myself. August, I made the cabin permanent. Changed my voter registration. Set up mail forwarding. Told Eleanor I was renting out my Connecticut house. Another lie, but easier than explaining I couldn't stand being there anymore. That every room reminded me I'd raised a son who now treated me like an obligation he'd found a loophole to avoid. Carol called in September. She'd driven past my house and seen it looked empty. I told her about Vermont then, because keeping it secret had started to feel less like privacy and more like shame, and I wasn't ashamed. I was done being ashamed of taking up space. Does David know? She asked. No. The pause on the other end of the line stretched out. Then, good. Carol got it. Carol had watched me shrink for 3 years, had bitten her tongue when I made excuses for them, had seen me pretend I wasn't devastated every holiday season. Now she heard something different in my voice. Not happiness, exactly. But something solid. Something that didn't bend. You should tell him though, she added. Eventually. Maybe. But I wasn't sure I would. Because telling David would invite questions, concern, probably criticism. Jennifer would find a way to make it about them, about how I was being distant, creating drama, not communicating my needs clearly enough, as if I hadn't spent 3 years communicating my need to be included and been ignored every single time. This wasn't about them anymore. That was the point. September became October. The leaves turned impossible colors, reds and oranges and yellows so bright they looked artificial. I hiked 4 miles every morning before the air got too cold. I learned to split wood for the fireplace, which probably looked ridiculous, a 67-year-old woman with an axe, but felt necessary. I was building something. Not just a cabin. Not just a new address. A boundary. One that wasn't negotiable or conditional or dependent on whether my family found me convenient. Then Halloween. Tyler turned 13. I saw the birthday party photos, Jennifer's whole family, plus David's co-workers, plus what looked like half of Tyler's grade. I'd mailed a card with a check inside 3 weeks earlier. Never got a thank you text. The check cleared though. That hurt worse than the missed holidays somehow. That my money was welcome but my presence wasn't. November arrived, and with it the question I'd been waiting for without realizing I was waiting. David called on a Tuesday evening. Not a holiday. Not an occasion. Just a random Tuesday, which should have been my first warning that something was different. Hey Mom. His voice sounded strained. We need to talk about Thanksgiving. My grip tightened on the phone. Okay. Jennifer's been worried about you. We both have. You've been distant. And we talked to Patricia about this, we think maybe you're isolating yourself. Which isn't healthy at your age. At my age. As if being 67 meant I couldn't be trusted to manage my own life. I'm not isolating, I said carefully. I'm just busy. Doing what? The question hung there, loaded. Because what could I possibly be busy with? I was retired, widowed, apparently too fragile for holiday gatherings. What could a woman like me have to do that mattered? I bought a house, I said. In Vermont. I've been fixing it up. Silence. Then, you what? I bought property. I'm living there now. Part-time. Maybe full-time eventually. And you didn't think to tell us? His voice had that edge it got when he felt blindsided, like I'd done something to him instead of something for myself. You didn't ask. Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear Jennifer in the background, asking what was wrong. David said something I couldn't make out, then came back to the phone. Mom, this is exactly what we're talking about. This kind of impulsive decision-making, cutting yourself off from family. I haven't cut myself off from anyone, I interrupted, and my voice was steady in a way it hadn't been in years. I've just stopped waiting around to be included. He didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe he did, but Jennifer took the phone. Linda. Her voice had that careful, therapeutic tone she used when she was about to say something she thought was kind but was actually condescending. "We want you to come for Thanksgiving this year. To David's parents' house. Where you should be. And we want to talk about some things. About support systems and making sure you're okay." Something cold settled in my chest. This wasn't an invitation. This was an intervention. They'd noticed I'd stopped begging for scraps from their table, and instead of asking why, instead of examining their own behavior, they'd decided something was wrong with me. "I have plans for Thanksgiving," I said. "Cancel them." "No." Jennifer's voice got harder. "We're your family. We're worried about you making rash decisions, spending money on property in the middle of nowhere, isolating from everyone who cares about you." "You're worried now," I said quietly. "That's interesting timing." Then I hung up. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. But underneath the adrenaline was something else: satisfaction. The dark, complicated satisfaction of finally saying no. Of finally not understanding. Of finally not making it easy. I knew they'd come. I knew this wasn't over. I just didn't know how prepared I'd need to be. Thanksgiving week, I drove to Vermont on Monday. The weather forecast predicted snow, early for the season, but not unheard of in the mountains. I stopped at the grocery store in town, bought enough food for one person for 5 days, plus extra batteries and candles in case the power went out. Ruth, the honey woman, was working the register. She rang up my items without comment until she got to the turkey breast. Just 3 pounds, the smallest they had. "Quiet Thanksgiving?" she asked. "The best kind," I said. She smiled like she understood, and maybe she did. Maybe I wasn't the only woman who'd found peace in the mountains because family had become too expensive in other ways. I spent Tuesday preparing the cabin. Not for guests, for security. Because after that phone call, after the way Jennifer's voice had turned sharp when I refused to cancel my plans, I knew they wouldn't just let this go. They'd decided I was a problem that needed solving, and people like Jennifer didn't leave problems unsolved. I called my lawyer on Wednesday morning. His name was Stephen Price, and he'd handled Robert's estate and my will updates. I told him I needed advice about something unusual. "I think my son and daughter-in-law might show up at my property uninvited," I said. "And I want to make sure I handle it legally." "Do they have a key?" Stephen asked. "No. I never gave them this address." "Then if they enter without permission, that's trespassing." He paused. "But Linda, are you sure this is where things are headed? With family, sometimes." "I'm sure," I said. "And I want to be prepared. Not aggressive. Just prepared." He understood, or pretended to. He gave me the name of a local attorney in Vermont, someone who could be available on short notice if needed. He also suggested I document everything: who came when, what was said. Create a record. I thanked him and hung up, feeling that same cold certainty I'd felt when I made the offer on this property. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just refusing to be surprised. Wednesday afternoon, I installed a security camera system. Nothing elaborate, just 3 cameras I'd ordered online, one covering the driveway, one on the front porch, one on the back door. They connected to my phone, sent alerts when they detected motion. The installer, a young guy named Chris who made the drive from Burlington, raised his eyebrows when I asked him to work Thanksgiving Eve. "Double time," I said. "And I'll pay cash." He didn't ask questions after that. By Wednesday evening, the cabin was ready. Cameras functioning. Extra locks installed. My phone fully charged. Stephen had the address and the name of the local police station, just in case. And I felt insane. Part of me felt absolutely insane. This was my son. My only child. The baby I'd rocked through colic and driven to soccer practice and helped move into his first apartment. I was installing security cameras to keep him out. Except he wasn't trying to get in because he loved me. He was trying to get in because I'd stopped being controllable. Because I'd built something he hadn't approved, made choices he hadn't overseen, created a life that didn't revolve around waiting for his permission to exist. I made pasta for dinner. Ate it standing at the kitchen counter, watching the sun set behind the mountains. My phone buzzed, a text from Carol. You okay? Yes, I typed back. Better than okay. David called me. Said you're not coming for Thanksgiving. Said he's worried. I know. He asked for your Vermont address. My stomach dropped. What did you tell him? Nothing. But Linda, he's planning something. Jennifer too. Be careful. I sent her a heart emoji because I didn't trust my words right then, and went to double-check the locks. Thanksgiving morning, I woke to 6 inches of snow and silence. Not the oppressive silence of my Connecticut house, but the clean silence of winter in the mountains. I made coffee, started a fire in the wood stove, put a small turkey breast in the oven at 8 a.m. even though I had no appetite. The cameras caught them at 11:37 a.m. A silver SUV, Jennifer's, I recognized it from photos, pulled into my driveway. David got out first, looked around like he was surveying territory. Jennifer followed, then Tyler, looking uncomfortable in a puffy jacket. Patricia emerged last, carrying what looked like a casserole dish covered in foil. They'd brought food. They'd brought the whole family. They were planning to have Thanksgiving here, at my cabin, without asking. I watched through the camera feed as David approached the door. Tried the handle, locked, obviously. Knocked. Called out, Mom? We know you're in there. Your car's here. I didn't answer. Just watched. Jennifer said something to David. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. A key. To my cabin. That I had never, ever given him. Later I'd find out he'd gotten it from the property management company I'd used during renovations, claimed he was my emergency contact, said he needed it for my safety. Later I'd find out Jennifer had orchestrated the whole thing, convinced David this was an intervention, that I was having some kind of breakdown and needed them to save me from myself. But in that moment, all I knew was my son was using a key I hadn't authorized to enter my home without permission. The door opened. They came inside, shaking snow from their coats, Patricia already heading toward my kitchen like she owned it. And I stepped out from the hallway, where I'd been waiting. Hello, David. He jumped. Actually jumped. Jennifer's hand went to her chest. Tyler looked like he wanted to disappear. Mom, David said, recovering. We were worried. You weren't answering your phone. Because I didn't want to talk, I said calmly. And you're trespassing. Trespassing. Jennifer laughed, sharp and disbelieving. Linda, we're family. We came to check on you because you're clearly not okay. I'm fine, I said. And you're still trespassing. That's when the second car pulled up. I'd called Stephen's Vermont contact that morning, early. Told him I anticipated an issue and wanted someone present who understood property law. His name was Daniel Kemp, 50-ish, drove a Subaru with Vermont plates and NO Farming NO Food bumper sticker. He parked behind Jennifer's SUV and got out with a briefcase. David's face went pale. What is this? This is my attorney, I said. Daniel Kemp. Daniel, this is my son David, his wife Jennifer, their son Tyler, and Jennifer's mother Patricia. They entered my home using a key they obtained without my permission. Daniel nodded, pulled out a notepad. Ma'am, do you want these individuals on your property? No, I said. I do not. Mom. David's voice cracked. This is insane. We're trying to help you. By breaking into my house? My voice stayed level. By deciding I need help because I finally stopped letting you ignore me? Jennifer stepped forward. We haven't ignored you. You're the one who moved away, who stopped communicating. I stopped begging, I corrected. There's a difference. A third vehicle appeared in the driveway, a police cruiser. I'd called them too, right before Daniel arrived. Not to press charges, just to document. To create a record that this had happened, that I hadn't invited them, that I'd had to protect myself from my own family. The officer, a woman named Sergeant Hayes, took statements from everyone. Daniel provided documentation that I was the sole owner of the property, that I had not given permission for entry. The cameras, bless those cameras, had recorded everything. David kept saying this was a misunderstanding. Jennifer kept insisting they were just worried, just trying to help. Patricia stood silent, holding her casserole dish like a shield, finally understanding maybe that this wasn't her house, wasn't her business, wasn't her place. Tyler wouldn't look at me. That hurt more than anything else. That my grandson had watched his parents do this and was too uncomfortable to say anything, or too trained, or too aware that speaking up would cost him something. Sergeant Hayes asked if I wanted to press charges. I looked at David. At Jennifer. At the key still in David's hand. No, I said quietly. But I want them to leave. Now. And I want that key destroyed. David handed it over like it burned him. Daniel took it, had Sergeant Hayes photograph it for the record, then used his own key to scratch deep grooves through the teeth, rendering it useless. You're making a mistake, Jennifer said, her voice tight with something between anger and panic. You're pushing away everyone who cares about you. You don't get to tell me that, I said, and for the first time in 3 years, my voice was loud. You don't get to exclude me from 6 holidays and then break into my house and call it care. You don't get to erase me and then act like I'm the problem when I stop letting you. Linda, Patricia started. You especially don't get to speak, I told her. You've been at every holiday I wasn't invited to. You knew. You all knew. They left. Jennifer crying. David stunned into silence. Patricia herding them toward the SUV like they were the victims in this. Tyler looked back once, just once before getting in the car, and I couldn't read his expression. The SUV backed out. Drove away. The snow kept falling. Sergeant Hayes and Daniel stayed another hour, making sure I was okay, taking additional statements. Daniel left me his card, said to call if they came back. Sergeant Hayes mentioned that sometimes family disputes escalated, that I should trust my instincts if I felt unsafe. I thanked them both. Closed the door. Locked it, all 3 locks, including the new one Chris had installed. And then I stood in my cabin, in the home I'd built for myself, and cried. Not because I regretted what I'd done, but because it had come to this. Because my son had chosen his wife's narrative over asking me what I needed. Because my family had shown up with lawyers of their own making, their certainty, their righteousness, and I'd had to meet them with actual lawyers just to protect my right to exist on my own terms. The turkey was done. I ate some of it, sitting at my oak table that seated 4 but held only me. The food tasted like nothing. Outside, the mountains were beautiful. Indifferent. Permanent. I'd won something today. I just wasn't sure yet what it had cost. The fallout took weeks to unfold. Days at first of silence, the kind that vibrates with unsaid things. Then Carol called. David called me again, she said. He's upset. Jennifer's furious. They're saying you embarrassed them, that you had them treated like criminals. They committed a crime, I said flatly. They obtained a key fraudulently and entered my home without permission. That's literally the definition of criminal trespass. I know. Carol sighed. I told him that. He didn't want to hear it. He thinks you're being vindictive. That this is payback for, and I'm quoting him here, some perceived slight about holidays. Perceived. As if I'd imagined 3 years of exclusion. As if the photos weren't evidence. As if my feelings were delusions instead of responses to their deliberate choices. What did you tell him? I asked. I told him he was lucky you didn't press charges. That most mothers would have. And that if he wanted to repair this, he needed to start with an apology, not an accusation. And he hung up on me. I wasn't surprised. David had learned from Jennifer how to rewrite narratives, how to be the wronged party in every story. In their version, I was the mother who'd overreacted, who'd taken normal family concern and weaponized it. Who'd chosen strangers, attorneys, police, over her own blood. They'd never asked themselves why I'd felt I needed that protection. That would require looking at their own behavior, and people like Jennifer and David didn't do that. They doubled down. December arrived. Then Christmas, holiday number 9. No card from David. No FaceTime call from Tyler. No text from Jennifer wishing me well, even the performative kind. They'd gone full silence, which felt like punishment but was actually relief. I spent Christmas at the cabin. Ruth invited me to her family's dinner. She had 3 sons, she said, and there was always room for one more. I went. Ate ham and sweet potatoes with strangers who asked polite questions and didn't press when I kept my answers vague. They didn't know my story. They just knew Ruth had invited me, and that was enough. One of her sons, Michael, asked what I did before retiring. I told him I'd been a nurse for 37 years, mostly in pediatrics. His eyes lit up. My daughter's thinking about nursing school, he said. Would you mind talking to her sometime? I gave him my number. 3 days later, his daughter Emma called, nervous and earnest, asking about prerequisite courses and shift work and whether I'd ever regretted the career. We talked for an hour. She sent me a thank you text afterward with 3 heart emojis. A stranger's daughter thanked me. My own grandson hadn't spoken to me in 6 weeks. January brought a different kind of silence. The snow got deeper. The days got shorter. I hiked less, read more. Started volunteering at a library in the nearest town, shelving books 2 mornings a week. The librarian, an older man named Frank, mentioned they had a literacy program if I was interested in tutoring. I said I'd think about it. What I was really thinking about was whether this was my life now. This quiet, deliberate existence among people who barely knew me. Whether I'd traded one kind of loneliness for another. But it wasn't the same. That was the thing I kept coming back to. In Connecticut, I'd been lonely while waiting for calls, for invitations, for acknowledgement. Here, I was alone by design. I'd chosen this. The ache was different when it came from your own hand instead of someone else's neglect. February. Valentine's Day. Eleanor texted from Connecticut. She'd been watering my plants, checking the mail. Asked if I was coming back. I told her I didn't think so, that I was thinking about selling. She called instead of texting back. Your son came by, she said carefully. Twice. Left notes. What did they say? I didn't read them. They're in your mailbox. But Linda. He looked upset. Really upset. I thanked her and hung up. Drove 5 hours back to Connecticut the next day, the first time I'd been there since August. The house felt like a museum of someone else's life. Photos of David as a child, of Robert before he got sick, of holidays when my family still included me. The notes were in the mailbox, just like Eleanor said. 2 of them, both from David, both on his company letterhead like this was business correspondence. The first one, dated January 10th. Asterisk Mom, we need to talk. You can't just cut us out of your life because you're angry. Tyler asks about you. Jennifer thinks we should give you space, but I think that's what you want, to make us feel guilty. Call me. Asterisk. Not an apology. A demand that I manage his discomfort. The second note, dated February 3rd. Asterisk. I talked to Aunt Carol. She said some things I've been thinking about. Maybe we both made mistakes. Maybe we can figure this out. But you have to meet me halfway. You have to stop hiding. Asterisk. Meet him halfway. As if the distance between us was equal. As if I hadn't spent 3 years trying to close a gap they kept widening. I didn't call. I took the notes, took some photographs I wanted from the walls, and drove back to Vermont. Listed the Connecticut house with a realtor the following week. It sold in March. Over asking. The couple who bought it had 3 kids and a golden retriever. They sent me a photo after closing. All of them on my front porch, smiling. The porch where Robert and I used to watch thunderstorms. Where David had taken prom photos. Where I'd waited for everyone to come home, back when home was a place people returned to. I was happy for them. Genuinely. They'd fill that house with better memories. Carol called when she found out. You really did it, she said. You're not coming back. No, I agreed. I'm not. David doesn't know yet. About the house. He will eventually. Linda. Do you think you'll ever reconcile? With him, with Jennifer? I thought about that. Really thought about it. If David wants to apologize, really apologize, not this we both made mistakes deflection, then maybe. If he wants to acknowledge what they did, how they excluded me, how they tried to gaslight me into thinking I was overreacting when I finally stopped accepting it, then maybe. And if he doesn't? Then I have this. I looked around the cabin, at the books on the shelves, at the quilt Carol had sent me as a housewarming gift, at the window where I watched birds at the feeder every morning. I have a life that doesn't require his permission or his approval. I have peace. Even if it's lonely. Even then. Because here's what I'd learned, what those 9 holidays and 3 years and 1 Thanksgiving confrontation had taught me: being alone isn't the same as being lonely. And being included isn't the same as being valued. My family had included me when it was convenient, when I fit their narrative, when I didn't ask for anything. The moment I wanted actual relationship, presence, consideration, thought, I became difficult. A problem. So I removed myself from the equation. And yes, sometimes I miss Tyler. Miss the grandson I barely know anymore, the teenager who's growing up in photos I'm not tagged in. Sometimes I miss the son David used to be, before he married Jennifer, before he learned to see me as an obligation instead of a person. But I don't miss waiting. Don't miss hoping. Don't miss the sick feeling in my stomach every holiday season, wondering if this time they'd remember. April brought spring to the mountains. The snow melted. Wildflowers appeared in the meadow. I planted a garden, tomatoes, basil, lettuce. Got a library card in my new town. Started tutoring for Frank's literacy program on Thursday evenings. One of my students was a woman named Grace, 63, learning to read because she'd hidden her illiteracy her whole adult life. She cried the first time she finished a whole paragraph without help. Told me this was the bravest thing she'd ever done. I thought about that. About bravery. About what it takes to admit you've been hiding, that you've been smaller than you wanted to be, that you've accepted less than you deserved. I thought about my cabin, my cameras, my attorney and police witness on Thanksgiving. How dramatic it must have seemed to David and Jennifer. How vindictive. But also how necessary. Because without that boundary, that absolute, documented, legally witnessed boundary, they would have kept coming. Kept pushing. Kept rewriting the story so I was the problem instead of their behavior. May. Mother's Day. Holiday number 10. Tyler sent me a text. The first direct communication since Thanksgiving. Asterisk Grandma. I'm sorry. For all of it. I should have said something. I'm sorry. Asterisk. I stared at that message for 20 minutes. Then typed back. Asterisk thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know. I love you. Asterisk. He didn't respond. But 3 hours later, another text. Asterisk can I call you sometime? Just me? Asterisk. Anytime, I wrote back. I'm always here for you. He called 2 days later. Awkward at first, both of us dancing around the obvious. Then he asked about Vermont, about the cabin, about whether I really had security cameras. I told him yes, I really did. Told him why. Dad says you overreacted, Tyler said quietly. But Grandma, they didn't invite you to anything. 4 years. I noticed. I asked Mom about it once and she said you were busy. I wasn't busy, I said. I was waiting to be wanted. Silence on the other end. Then, I wanted you there. Those 4 words cracked something open in my chest. I wanted to be there, Ty. More than anything. We talked for 40 minutes. He told me about school, about baseball, about a girl he liked but was too nervous to talk to. Normal things. Grandfather-grandson things we should have been having all along. Before we hung up, he said, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but Mom and Dad have been fighting. About you. About Thanksgiving. Dad feels really bad. He won't say it, but I can tell. Tyler, you don't have to. I know. But I wanted you to know. That it's not like they don't care. They just... I don't know. They messed up. After we hung up, I sat with that. With the possibility that David did feel bad, did recognize what he'd done, but couldn't figure out how to say it. Or was too proud. Or was too afraid Jennifer would see it as betrayal. I didn't call him. Didn't reach out. If David wanted reconciliation, he knew where I was. He had my number. He had choices. Just like I'd had choices, and I'd finally made the ones that protected me instead of protecting his comfort. June arrived. Then July. Summer in Vermont was everything spring had promised. Long days, cool nights, the garden producing more tomatoes than one person could eat. I gave bags of them to Ruth, to Frank, to Grace. Started hiking again, longer trails, harder climbs. I turned 68 in August. Carol came up for the weekend, brought champagne and chocolate cake. We sat on the porch at sunset, and she asked the question she'd been holding back for months. Are you happy? I thought about it. Really thought. I'm at peace, I said finally. Which might be better. Better than happy. More sustainable. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Maybe everyone reaches a point where peace becomes more valuable than joy, where steady beats exhilarating, where knowing what to expect, even if it's solitude, beats hoping for something that never arrives. Labor Day weekend. Tyler called again, asked if he could visit. Just him. Take the train to Vermont, spend a few days. I said yes before checking with David or Jennifer, because Tyler was almost 14 now, old enough to make some of his own choices about who he wanted in his life. He arrived on a Friday afternoon. Taller than I remembered. Voice deeper. Still my grandson, but becoming someone I didn't quite know. We hiked. Cooked together. Sat on the porch and didn't talk much, just existed in the same space. On Saturday night, he asked if he could see the security footage from Thanksgiving. Why? I asked carefully. Because I want to understand what happened. What really happened. Not just what Mom and Dad say. I showed him. Watched his face as he watched the screen. David trying the door, pulling out the key, coming inside uninvited. Jennifer's voice caught on audio, saying I clearly wasn't okay. Me standing there, calm and prepared, with Daniel and Sergeant Hayes arriving. Wow, Tyler said softly. You were ready. I had to be. Because you knew they'd come. Yes. He looked at me then, really looked. That's so sad, Grandma. That you had to prepare for them like they were strangers. Like they were dangerous. Not dangerous, I said. Just unwilling to hear no. He nodded slowly. Didn't say anything else. Didn't have to. Before Tyler left on Monday, he hugged me. A real hug, not the obligatory kind, and whispered, I'm going to do better. I'm going to make sure you're invited. Even if I have to fight with them about it. Tyler, you don't have to fight with your parents for me. Yeah, I do. Because it's not right. What they did. What we all did. He meant it. I could see it in his eyes, that teenage righteousness that comes from recognizing injustice and wanting to fix it. Part of me wanted to protect him from that fight. Part of me was grateful he was willing to have it. September. October. The leaves turned again, that second autumn in Vermont. I was shelving books at the library when Frank approached with someone behind him. A man about my age, weathered face, kind eyes. Linda, this is James. He just moved here from Massachusetts. Retired teacher. I thought maybe you two should meet, since you're both helping with the literacy program. James extended his hand. Pleasure. Frank says you're the reason Grace is reading chapter books now. Grace is the reason Grace is reading chapter books, I said. I just showed up twice a week. He smiled. That's more than most people do. We talked for 20 minutes. He'd lost his wife 2 years ago. Had a daughter in California who called every Sunday. Was learning to be alone without being lonely, he said, and I nodded because I understood exactly what he meant. He asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime. I said yes. Not because I was looking for romance or distraction or someone to fill spaces David had left empty, but because James seemed like a person who understood that starting over wasn't failure. It was survival. Thanksgiving arrived. Holiday number 11. Tyler texted on Monday, Grandma, can I ask you something? Of course. Can I come to Vermont for Thanksgiving instead of staying here? My heart stuttered. What about your parents? Asterisk, they're going to Jennifer's parents again. I told them I wanted to see you instead. Dad said okay. Mom's mad, but Dad said it's my choice asterisk. I stared at that message. David had said okay. David had, for the first time in years, chosen me. Or at least chosen to let Tyler choose me. You're always welcome here, I wrote. Always. He came on Wednesday. Brought his homework, his laptop, a duffel bag full of clothes. We cooked a turkey together. A real one this time, 12 pounds. Made stuffing from scratch. Mashed potatoes. Pumpkin pie from a recipe Ruth had given me. On Thanksgiving Day, we ate at the oak table that seated 4. Just the 2 of us. And it didn't feel empty. It felt full. Tyler talked about school, about baseball season, about the girl he'd finally asked out. Told me about the fights at home, how David and Jennifer barely spoke to each other anymore, how he'd heard his dad crying in the garage one night and didn't know what to do. Do you think they'll get divorced? He asked quietly. I don't know, sweetie. Maybe. Sometimes people grow apart. Is that what happened with you and Dad? I thought about how to answer that. We didn't grow apart. We were pushed apart. By choices he made, by priorities that didn't include me. But Tyler, that wasn't your fault. You need to know that. I know. But I still feel bad. Like I should have done something. You were a kid. You are a kid. It's not your job to manage adult relationships. He nodded, but I could see he didn't quite believe me. 13-year-olds always think they're responsible for more than they are. After dinner, my phone rang. David. I almost didn't answer. Then I did. Hi. Mom. His voice was rough, like he'd been crying. Or not sleeping. Or both. I just wanted to say, Tyler got there safe, right? Yes. He's here. We're good. Okay. Good. That's good. Silence. Then, Mom, I'm sorry. For all of it. For the holidays, for showing up at your house, for the key, for not listening when you tried to tell us you felt excluded. For letting Jennifer convince me you were the problem when really I was just being a coward. I sat down. Tyler was watching me from the couch, eyes wide. I don't know how to fix this, David continued. I don't know if I can. Jennifer and we're not good. And I keep thinking about Thanksgiving last year, about how scared you must have been that we showed up like that. About how much had to go wrong for you to feel like you needed lawyers and police just to keep your own son out of your house. My throat tightened. David. I chose her over you. Over and over. I convinced myself we were simplifying, creating boundaries, focusing on our nuclear family. But really I was just letting her exclude you because it was easier than fighting with her. And now Tyler barely talks to me, and you won't talk to me, and I'm alone in this house realizing I threw away the people who actually loved me for someone who just wanted to control things. I closed my eyes. This was the apology I'd wanted. But hearing it hurt worse than the silence had. Because now I had to decide what to do with it. I accept your apology, I said quietly. But David, I can't go back to how things were. I can't be the mother who waits around hoping to be included. I built a life here. I have friends, commitments, peace. I'm not giving that up. I'm not asking you to. He took a shaky breath. I'm just asking if maybe sometime, I could visit. Just me. No Jennifer, no interventions. Just me trying to know my mother again. I looked at Tyler, who was nodding frantically, and felt something in my chest unclench. Yes, I said. You can visit. Really? Really? But David, you need to understand something. The cameras stay. The locks stay. The boundaries stay. If I say no to something, you respect it. If I need space, you give it. Those are the terms. Okay, he said immediately. Okay, yes. Whatever you need. We talked for a few more minutes. Made tentative plans for him to come up in December. No promises beyond that. Just one visit. One chance to see if we could build something new from the wreckage of what we'd had. After we hung up, Tyler hugged me. Thank you, he said, for giving him another shot. I'm not doing it for him, I said. I'm doing it for me. Because I want to see if your dad can show up differently. And I'm doing it for you, because you deserve to have a grandmother and a father who can be in the same room. And you're doing it because you're brave, Tyler said. I laughed, startled. Brave? Yeah. It's scary to let people back in after they hurt you. That's the definition of brave. Maybe he was right. Maybe bravery wasn't just cameras and lawyers and boundaries. Maybe it was also this, the willingness to risk being hurt again, to give people chances they maybe didn't deserve, to hope for something better while protecting yourself from something worse. December came. David visited the second weekend, alone like he'd promised. It was awkward at first. We were strangers learning each other's rhythms. But we hiked the trail to the waterfall, and he told me about the separation from Jennifer, about therapy, about realizing how much of himself he'd lost trying to keep her happy. I don't know if we'll divorce, he said. But I know I can't keep living like that. Where someone else's comfort matters more than everyone else's humanity. I didn't say I told you so. Didn't say I'd known Jennifer was the problem. Just nodded and kept walking. Before he left, he stood in the driveway and looked at the cabin. It's nice here, Mom. I get why you chose it. It chose me, I think. He smiled a little. I'm glad it did. I'm glad you built this. Even if it meant leaving us behind. I didn't leave you behind, I said. I stepped out of a story where I was invisible and wrote my own instead. He hugged me. A real hug, like Tyler's. Like he meant it. I'm going to keep showing up, he said. If that's okay. I'm going to keep trying. Okay, I said. We'll see. Because that's the thing about boundaries. They're not walls. They're gates. And gates can open when the person on the other side has earned the right to enter. It's been a year now since that Thanksgiving. Since the cameras caught my family trespassing. Since I stood my ground with lawyers and police and the kind of preparation that shouldn't be necessary for people you love. David visits once a month. Tyler comes more often. We're building something new. Not a replacement for what was lost, but something different. Something where I'm chosen, not tolerated. Where my presence is wanted, not endured. Jennifer and I don't speak. David says she's still angry, still convinced I'm the villain in this story. I don't try to change her mind. Some people need villains so they don't have to see themselves clearly. James and I get coffee every week. Sometimes we hike together. He's teaching me to cross-country ski. We're not in love, not like that. But we're companions. Two people who rebuilt themselves in the mountains and found each other in the rubble. Ruth still sells me honey. Grace is reading novels now, calling me sometimes to discuss them. Frank asked if I'd run for library board, said they needed someone with my backbone. I said I'd think about it. And Carol still calls every Sunday, like clockwork, asking if I'm happy yet. I tell her the same thing every time, I'm at peace. Which is better. Because here's what I learned in those 6 missed holidays, in that desperate scramble to protect myself, in the year of rebuilding that followed. You can't make people value you. You can only decide whether to keep waiting for them to notice you're gone. I stopped waiting. I built a life that didn't require their approval. And when they finally showed up, I made them knock. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever had to choose yourself when everyone else chose convenience, if you've ever built boundaries so strong they looked like walls, know that you're not alone. Know that peace is possible. Know that you deserve to be chosen, not accommodated. Check the description box below for more stories like this one. Stories about people who rebuilt themselves when their families broke them. Stories about survival that doesn't look graceful but works anyway. And if you're watching from somewhere, anywhere, drop a comment and tell me where you are. Tell me your story if you want. Tell me you understand, if you do. Because we find each other in the rubble. Those of us who rebuilt ourselves. We recognize each other by our foundations.